Hi, I'm Sandy Schreck for LBR Educates, and today's lesson we're going to look at vase design. I have some updated techniques that I want to show you that'll improve your efficiency and really give you great increased profitability with less labor. We see the vases changing some. This is the Lulita Vase and the Lulita Vase from Syndicate Sales. They're a couple of my favorites, and so that's the vase we're going to be starting with today. You can see it has a little bit lower profile, and our designs have come into groupings and have more of a flare rather than quite an upright or compact look that we have been seeing trend for a long time. So we're going to get started. I don't pre-green the vase because I feel like it's extra labor. I do not add a taped grid on it. I'm going to be using my flower stems to create that grid. So you can see my first two insertions are clearly in X coming in. My next insertion is going to come in and come over the top of that again. I do want these two to be grouped together. So you can see I'm forming X's, and each stem is going to come in over the top of that X, and that's going to form an internal grid that we'll be able to utilize as the structure in this design rather than doing a taped grid that lots of times pops off by the time it gets to customers. There you can see a great mechanical grid that you can create. At this point is when I'm going to add some foliages in. I like to use salal and a little bit of other varieties of greens, but my salal is going to come in the same fashion where I'm crossing grids over. You don't want any greens under the water line because that will cause potentially bacteria. So I just have 4 pieces of greens that I put in. I have a couple things in groupings, and roses over here, 2 carnations, 2 stems of buttons. And now you can see as I'm putting up my next layer of flowers, they're going to stand all by themselves with that internal grid that we created with flower placement. Just coming back, putting them in groups of 2. So I'm working with light flowers. I have prepared my flowers a little bit, cleaned them up, but you need to remove any of that petals. And as we're choosing our flowers, we want to look at that variety of textures. So I have the velvety round area of the rose that comes in. I get the fragrance off the rose and also stock. Fragrance is another one of the 5 senses that are really coming back in. We see that people craving that experience and wanting that scent, the fragrance, the element of design as a design element. Texture is another one of our elements of design. And in here you can see I'm using an eryngium, which is kind of a thistle type flower, but it creates interest within the design. And you can see the different varieties of textures that we have. Next, we're going to come in with some of the lembush grown alstroemeria. It's in a very efficient stem to use with the multiple flower heads. You're able to get a lot of coverage off of a single insertion. Another trend that we're seeing is the neotropical trend. So this is one of the leucadendrons, which is a protea. Comes out of California, or these come out of California. This is a safari sunset leucadendron. And it adds that interest in again, where something different. I'm putting it up in the focal area so that it is money on top. It is a little bit more of an expensive flower. So I'm going to add that up into a focal area and then add some ranunculus as well. I need to look at the color distribution that I have and come in. I've got 3 of the ranunculus. Because of the lighter color, it is going to draw your eye stronger. So not only do you need to pay attention to the flowers, but also the color placement and distribution throughout your design too, so that you get a pleasing outcome. I put a couple of these in before, but I'm also using button chrysanthemums. I like those, or novelty chrysanthemums. It's a long-lasting item, but it comes in, and again, a multiple stem head, so that you get a lot of coverage per insertion. Just look at that. At this point, we're going to add a few other textural elements. So it feels quite balanced. You do want to do one little inspection to see if you've got greens, foliages under the water. In that case, you'd want to pick it up. But you can feel that on this, I have resistance. So I know that this is going to make it to the customer looking the same way that I intended it to. Bonsai Euc is one item that is trending. Eucalyptus has been trending for a while. I like the Bonsai Euc because of the multiple breaks, so I feel like I get a lot of coverage. If you flip it over kind of to the back side, then you can see where you can cut and create multiple stems. Keeping it on that main primary stem is going to be the fastest way to insert it. And coming in and doing that cut and pulling up as you go in will hide that blunt tip as we're going. And you can see that I added that eucalyptus predominantly on the lower perimeter. I am going to add one up in the middle to help pull those two together and connect those two elements. Seeded eucalyptus is another texture that you can see we're introducing. What a difference that makes. And it just draws you in. Just feel that different textures pulling attention. Right here, my placement's going to be with my roses. People equate roses with value, and so I want to do something, add an element that's going to draw a little bit more attention to that. And lastly, come in with some wax flower, filler flower. Clean these up. Now some of these last insertions, I'm going to kind of come from the outside and go all the way across. You kind of got to twist it a little bit, but this is really, really going to lock in that grid and finish off kind of that outside edge. And that's using these lower profile vases. You can see I can get much more of a spread on this design. I do have a little bit of salal that we can just color in just a little bit here. And that the same thing where I'm coming across the whole design and locking in all of those X's. Another tip for less experienced designers as you're designing is to pull that vase right to the edge. Now I am used to doing the length of insertions, but if you're less experienced, what you can do is hold that flower where you want it to be, right over the edge. Then I pinch my fingers where I want to make that cut. And then as I make that cut, then it's going to come in and it's going to go to the height that I want it to and also to the bottom of the vase. You can see all my stems are going down into that lower third of the vase. This is our updated vase, showing you some labor-saving techniques and some ways to use product efficiently. so that you can really increase your profitability and add that extra perceived value. If you like this and want to see others, make sure and subscribe.